I still remember it was a few years ago in the summer. That day, the neighboring village was awarded the annual Model Village for Spiritual Civilization. Even their village's secretary became a role model for miles around. This made our village leader quite envious. So, he decided to follow suit. He organized an event in the village to promote good deeds. Anyone who did a good deed could earn points. Eventually, the good person king would be selected based on these points. Later, in order to motivate the villagers, the village leader even spared no expense to provide prizes. He prepared a large number of prizes. As expected, everyone's spirits immediately soared. They all hurried home to prepare for it. The next day, the weather was fine. My father and Awen's father got up early and went out to do good deeds. As they passed a fork in the road, Awen's father immediately noticed an old lady by the roadside. Without saying a word, he rushed up and stopped the ant. The ant looked stunned. But before she could speak, she was lifted onto the shoulders by Awen's father. Then he shuttled back and forth in the middle of the road. After crossing the road, he shouted for 1 point. 2 points. This scene of scoring points repeatedly truly dumbfounded my father. When Awen's father reached the 8th point, my father couldn't sit still anymore. He rushed over and carried the ant back. Then my father carried the ant and ran to the next intersection. But Awen's father got angry right away. This is clearly plagiarism. After saying that, he rushed over and dragged the ant over. Now it was my father's turn again. And so the two of them continued to score points repeatedly. If it weren't for almost being mistaken for a human trafficker by the public security team, being taken as a human trafficker, I reckon both dads could carry the old lady to another province. Heard of such a commotion, the villagers were afraid to see both our dads, afraid of being carried away by these two troublemakers. And the dads were also at a loss. However, as we were walking home in a daze, we saw two people in the distance, seemed to be arguing with each other. Initially, our dads didn't want to get involved, but just as they were about to leave, Awen's dad grabbed their arms. Jackson, I feel like breaking up the fight is also doing a good deed. Let's each try to calm one down. We'll share the credit later. What do you think? At that time, my dad didn't think much of it. He just nodded and agreed. After all, we are all from the same village. The battle was quickly diffused. But the two of them still didn't back down. Both were on edge. Just as the two fathers were in a dilemma, my father keenly noticed them, while the other one had 5 bags in his head. It was based on the principle of fairness and justice. So Dad decided to split that bag into 5 as well. Thinking of this, Dad stood up and threw a punch. After that, he turned to Awen's father and said, Zizi, you hammer the remaining bag. This way, each of us gets 1 share. Awen's father was almost moved to tears at that time. Without hesitation, he went up and punched again. Later, they thought everyone could make peace and prosper this way. But that person went crazy at that moment. He chased our two fathers with a hammer for at least 5 hills. Several villagers nearby who didn't know the reason, even thought a deity had descended. They started kneeling and worshipping behind. After this incident, the village chief was greatly angered. That day, he announced over the loudspeaker the disqualification of our two fathers from the competition. Our father's status in the village has decreased significantly.